So we move on with the next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Piyush Padmanabhan, and he is co-CEO in Next Big Innovation Lab, Bengaluru, Karnataka. So we welcome you, Mr. Piyush.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, thank you. I think for some reason I'm logged out of, I got logged out of the other meeting. I've logged in through my laptop as well. Uh,
Okay.
so I'll just log in again and I think, yeah,
Okay.
yes, yes. Yes, so I think I'm logged in. Yes, sorry, my bad.
So you can start sharing your screen.
Sure. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Divya ma'am, for having me here. And it's a really great moment, to share the knowledge that we have built at least over the last few years. 4 years we've been operating in the space of bioprinting. It is an up and coming field. It is a niche technology, and we've been working at it on an industrial level. We've been operating for the past 4 years. And what we do is we build customizable 3D bioprinters. We've developed some patents along the way while building these printers, and we deploy these printers along with our unique processes and trade secret biomaterials to develop human skin. Um, the goal for us, obviously, for any bioprinting company is to bridge the gap, the abyss between available transplantable organs and the demand for them. And that's where, that is sort of like the holy grail for 3D bioprinting. So what I'll do is I'll basically just keep stopping myself in between so that I can probably answer a few questions. I do not want to bore you all with a lot of details, but I'll be more than happy to just stop in between and take questions from time to time. Um, so this is what we do as a company. We consider ourselves to be a bioprinting company that not only focuses on the tech, but we also focus on how the technology can be applied on the biotech side of things as well. And that's where we are looking at developing human skin. We are currently in the final phases of developing this. I will explain to you as the slides go by. Um, so we now, to understand bioprinting, I think to get a specific knowledge of it. So basically, bioprinting is, in 3D printing, you would use plastics, you would use metals in order to extrude or to layer. But here you're using specific biomaterials. These biomaterials, along with certain cell nutrients and certain chemicals that help protect the cells during the process of 3D bioprinting and provide them with a natural environment during the 3D bioprinting process. This entire thing is called a bioink. So the bioink, along which contains the cells, is layered on like any 3D printing concept. So the core of bioprinting lies in 3D printing, but the difference being that here you're using cells. So you have a layer on layer approach where you get a scaffold, a tissue. It's called a basic tissue construct, and this scaffold is incubated over a period of time. Um, Given the right amount of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and temperature conditions in order to develop into a completely developed tissue. So this is the overall skeleton of the 3D bioprinting process. Now, why is the world looking at 3D bioprinting right now? This bioprinting has come out of a lot of focus. Globally, there are around 110 bioprinting companies working on either aspects of the technology, either on the engineering, or they are working on the biotech aspect, or focusing on the biomaterials. For us, why we think the world is looking at 3D bioprinting is precise cell positioning. So when you're building the initial scaffold construct, what I just showed you over here, when you're building this construct, you're able to precisely place the cells. The technology allows you to place the cells one besides the other, and also allows you to place the cells control the cell density per square millimeter of the scaffold construct. Now, within the human body, native in its native conditions, the cell to cell interaction is really good. Um, the technology, but replicating that within the lab is quite difficult using, certain using traditional biotechnology methods, and that's where 3D bioprinting comes to the fore, where it helps to improve the positioning, thereby improving cell-to-cell interactions. The ability to work with multiple cell types. So that is one thing that 3D bioprinting offers. At one go, I'm able to, for example, if you're looking at the skin, the topmost layer consists of keratinocytes, and the layer below that consists of fibroblasts. And you can the technology that we have developed in house, and also other 3D bioprinters, allows you to work with multiple cell types at one go. And given that organs are a conglomerate of different cell types, this basically plays a very important and key role in this. In When you're looking at the business that we are into, which is developing tissue constructs for testing, it lowers the fabrication costs overall and helps us improve larger tissues and larger manufacturing numbers. Right now, 3D bioprinting has the capability to work with whole or hollow organs, but the goal is to move towards whole organs. So this is the team. Just to give a brief introduction, we have people who come in from various backgrounds. I'm going to focus and stress on this point again and again. 3D bioprinting is a highly interdisciplinary field. So the team that you see here consists of people who come in from a biochemical background, who come in from biomaterials, who come in from biotech, tissue culturing to be specific. If you're looking at the engineering, core engineering aspect of it, we have people from mechatronics, people from engineering, mechanical engineering, electronics. So people from different backgrounds that come together in order to actually build the machine as well as build the human skin. It's four of us founders, Pooja, Alok, Ratan, and myself. Four of us come from different backgrounds. Alok and Ratan from engineering, Pooja and I from biotech. For me specifically, I've graduated with a bachelor's in biotechnology from VIT University. And after which I worked in the organ transplantation segment, specifically in sales and marketing at Biocon Limited and Roche Pharmaceuticals. After which the four of us started this entire journey together. Now, we've been able to do whatever work that we're doing through various affiliations. One is through the central state government, through the BIRAC grants, to the Elevate grant that comes under the Karnataka state government. We are incubated at Bangalore Bioinnovation Center, which is a state-of-the-art center run by the Karnataka state government that allows us to do our work. And we are currently in a partnership project with Merck Pharma at Germany as well. That's it about us. Now I think I'll get into the core concepts of 3D bioprinting and what bioprinters are all about. So when you're looking at 3D bioprinting as a technology, these are your core elements. You have the extruder. The extruder basically is the part that houses the cells within the syringe or the extruder holder. And you have the bed. The bed basically moves in the XY or the Z plane. You have temperature control systems that help to control the temperature of both the extruders and bed in order to maintain a more close to physiological temperature or specific temperatures depending upon your biomaterial of interest. And then you have the biomaterial itself here. The biomaterial itself plays a very important role because it helps to protect the cells during the bioprinting process. And apart from protecting the cells during the bioprinting process, the biomaterial plays a key role in providing the cells with the right environment for them to start proliferating and migrating throughout the scaffold. You have obviously the electronics, you have the software that helps you control the printer, and also there are slicing softwares that allow you to create your scaffolds of interest. Then you have the firmware, which is the brain of the machine, and you have sterility options, which is basically providing germicidal UV, making it a mini biosafety cabinet by providing a H14 HEPA system as well. So this is where 3D bioprinting as such play. I mean, when you're looking at a bioprinter setup, these are the key components that go into a bioprinter setup. When you're looking at anything in 3D bioprinting, your extruder, the type of extruder that you're going to choose, the kind of bed that you're going to choose, the level of temperature control, the level of sterility required, as well as your biomaterial, all of them come down to one thing: your cell type of interest. What we understood early on during our process is that, while we were building the bioprinter, while we were in our initial days, is that, when we pick out our tissue, the tissue that we want to work with, which is now skin, we realized that, we had to understand our cell type of interest really well, because you have to create your biomaterial based on the cell type of interest, and the hardware that you're going to choose in 3D bioprinting is dependent upon your cell type of interest. So all of these together play a very, very vital role in actually your cells actually plays a vital role in determining all the other factors that go into your bioprinting process. When you're looking at the technology of bioprinting, there are specifically, okay, so before I go ahead, I would like to just ask if there's any questions with regards to the core concepts that I just explained here, before I go in depth into each of the other things.
None yet.
None yet. Okay. Okay. So when you're looking at the types of 3D bioprinting tech, primarily these are the three biggest ones that you see. One is the micro extrusion pattern, which is widely used globally. And then you have the inkjet version, which works pretty much like a Canon inkjet printers. And you have laser assisted ones, which have their own unique technology. All of these, in terms of cost and precision, they go higher up the scale as you go from technology to technology. Each of them have their each of them have their own positives and negatives, and that's where 3D bioprinting actually allows you to choose between different technologies, and that's a great aspect of the engineering behind this domain. So let me talk about the most widely used method, micro extrusion bioprinting. So this specific type of bioprinting allows you to work with a wide range of biomaterials. Low to mid-range pricing is generally what you would see when you're looking at the technologies, and it's easy to use. So the ease of use is one important factor in bioprinting. Biotechnologists do not generally want to go and put their heads into understanding the technology part of it too much. But here the domain actually demands the scientist to go into a little bit into the technology. And most scientists prefer micro extrusion bioprinting because it allows you to work with a wide range of biomaterials and it's easy to use. Within this, there are different types. There are motor-based, pneumatic-based, and screw-based. I will go into each of them separately. The first one is the motor-based extrusion setup. So you basically have a motor on top that pushes the piston down. When it pushes the piston down, the biomaterial is extruded. Now, the problem with this is when the motor pushes against this, and when you want to stop extruding, at that point, there is a little bit of something what we call over extrusion. And you have over extrusion of the biomaterial here, which basically means low retraction control. And given the number of moving parts that are there within this, you have the level of sterility that cleaning these parts is actually quite difficult. When we started out the company, we went with this kind of technology where we had a motor basically sitting on top that was pushing down. But the problem was, we weren't able to clean the setup easily. The sterility was really low. And also, when we printed, we got very disfigured structures because the flow was not uniform. Then we tested another setup, which is a screw-based setup. So basically, you have the cells and biomaterials that move in from here. They move in through each of the rings of the screw, as you can see over here, and then it gets extruded. Here again, there are a lot of moving parts. You have medium to low retraction control here, But the problem with this setup is that, you know, your cells, your cell viability goes down over a period of time, and it really affects the entire process, beats the entire concept of bioprinting altogether. And apart from that, cleaning the entire part is also quite, because you have a lot of cell debris within these groups. So this is one technology that this is the least used if you want to call up the micro extrusion technologies. Then you have the pneumatic setup. So this is a more this is a more widely used setup where you're using pneumatic pressure, using air pressure to basically push a plunger. The plunger pushes down on the biomaterial, and that basically extrudes your bioink. Now, cleaning the syringe or the setup is much more easier with regards to this. There is a low number of moving parts here. There are a low number of moving parts here. And also, when you're looking at sterility, maintaining the sterility within this setup is much more easier. Now, if you want to compare these three forms of micro extrusion technology, the biomaterials used in in a pneumatic setup is much more in number as compared to a motor-based or a screw-based driven setup. This is a short video of what basically we do in the lab. So you can see here that this is basically what we're doing. One of our biomaterials that we are testing within the lab. So you see that, you know, the biomaterial is getting one layer on top of another. This is the final layer that you see. So we are using a concentric circular print, and this allows us. You can see the uniform extrusion that is happening during the process. Now, this is obviously a to and fro process. Once we figure out the biomaterial, there are a lot of parameters within the machine that you need to finalize before, you know, actually going ahead and saying, okay, this is the final bioink. So what you see here is the structure that we have printed. This is pretty much the structure that we're using to also print human skin. Now, before I go into inkjet, I would be happy to take any questions in case. I do see a couple of comments in the chats, but yeah, can you explain about the bed?
Yes.
I think I can go back to the bed concept a little more here. So when you're looking at a 3D bioprinting process, the bed plays an important role. The bed is where, you know, you keep your you keep your say a petri dish, or you keep your well plate. Now the bed specifically can be temperature controlled. So what we have in our printers is a temperature controlled bed that allows us to basically work with a wide range of temperatures while printing biomaterials. Now, I do have a video later on that actually shows how the bed works in our setup. I will, you know, basically your bed is what actually controls how much, what area, and what is the area that you will be able to print in. So determining the area of the bed early on in the process, depending upon, which again depends upon your cell type of interest. So for example, if I'm printing skin, I do not need a bed that is quite big. I can use a bed that is probably the size that you saw in the video right now is about 7 centimeters by 7 centimeters square. And if you're using something like bone, you might need a little larger bed, which might be a 20 centimeter by a 20 centimeter bed. Now your bed determines the size of your machine as well. So it plays a vital role in in how your construct is actually being made. But all that given, the bed, your cell type of interest determines what kind of bed you're going to use in your setup. I hope I've answered that question, but I do have this video. If you see here, the bed is 7.5 by 7.5. And we have basically we've built a holder that holds the entire extruder, that holds the entire well plate onto the bed. Now, what you see here is the bed moving on the X and Y plane, and the extruder moving on Z planes. That is how it basically works. So the bed here is moving on X and Y, and the extruder is moving up and down. So let me move on to inkjet based bioprinting. Inkjet is used for niche applications. It's used for applications where it has been used for skin, and it has been used for certain applications specific to more robust cells. So when you're looking at cells such as fibroblasts that are present in the skin, that's where it is being used. It provides higher accuracy, it provides greater speed. I would say the pricing for jet-based bioprinters is somewhere mid to high range. But the problem with inkjet-based bioprinters is that you can only work with a certain type of number of biomaterials and certain type of cells, because there is a lot of shear during the process of inkjet-based bioprinting. So if you're looking at inkjet widely, there are two different types that are widely used. One is a thermal-based setup, where you have a heater bubble over here, a heater which basically creates a vapor bubble. The vapor bubble basically creates this sort of like a small droplet, and that droplet, that's a droplet that you see here. You get a pico level control during the entire process of inkjet-based bioprinting in both processes. In a piezo-based setup, you have the piezo actuator. This actuator basically moves both of these hit against each other, and as they hit, they form these small tiny bubbles and small tiny droplets, and these micro droplets are layered onto the bed. Now if you're looking at a piezoelectric inkjet setup, you have a picoliter extrusion capability, and you have a high amount of cell damage. So the problem with inkjet printers is that these piezoelectric actuators do not see if a cell is present in between them or not, which actually leads to a lot of cell shear, which leads to a lot of cell death. And it had but one real good advantage is that you get very good control over the size of the droplets that are formed, and you get very good retraction control. So there is no over extrusion of your bio ink. Now, why I'm saying over extrusion again and again is because the bioinks contain cells, and for any researcher, cells and biomaterials are a very expensive commodity, and to waste them would actually cause a lot of financial stress to your experiment. And that's where I'm talking about over extrusion. That's why bioprinters as such, when you're purchasing a bioprinter, when you're looking at bioprinters, you have to look at how how you're able to get control over the extrusion of your biomaterial and cells. So when we are bioprinting, for example, we do not we ensure that there is no wastage of cells during the process of bioprinting. So we ensure that we get a high level of control over the retraction during the bioprinting process. Then you have a more thermal based setup in inkjet. Here in thermal, you have a heater bubble that is created. The problem is that when the airlock is formed, sometimes you do find that the biomaterial gets stuck, but you do get a good level of retraction control. Now, your biomaterial that you're using here plays a very important role, because it should be of a certain viscosity and of a certain make, in order to ensure that you get a good level. You get the air bubble formation is precise. Here again, you have medium to high cell damage because of the heater coils that are there around this tubing over here. So that's why, as you can imagine, both these processes, piezo-based as well as thermal-based, do cause a lot of cell shear, because of which we are not, a lot of companies do not prefer going into this kind of a setup. With that being said, they do have certain niche applications with robust cell types. And that's where we see the applications of the technology. But the main hurdle over here with inkjet-based bioprinting would be in terms of the biomaterial that is actually being used during the process. The biomaterial composition is key in this process. Next is laser assisted. I would like to see if there's any questions on inkjet based, if I could answer them now. I don't think there's anything. Yeah, sure. So laser assisted bioprinting is a process where it has a few use cases. It is high speed bioprinting, where you get really good precision and you get very good control over your scaffold construction. Here, this is basically what happens. You have a laser pulse that goes into an energy absorbing layer, which is mainly gold or any neutral metal. So what happens is it absorbs the heat from the laser, and then you have a biomaterial ribbon over here. The biomaterial, once the laser hits, the laser forms a very tiny droplet that falls onto the bed, and it's basically layered one layer on top of the other. Um, this methodology has been used for printing skin, and it has also been used for printing muscle tissue in Europe. But there are a lot of drawbacks as well as positives. The positives are that you get a good level of control in the process. You get a picoliter extrusion capability. It uses a technology called droplet on demand, where your droplets are very well controlled, and you have medium cell damage over here. The problem with the setup is that purchasing or building a laser based bioprinter is extremely expensive, and the biomaterials that you would use in this are highly specialized, because in order for this ribbon to form over here, and in order for it to be held properly, and in order for it to actually form the bubble, to figure out the right kind of laser and the power for your biomaterial, all of these are trial and error processes that take a long period of time. So to understand basically what the applications of your technology are going to be, that would be a good starting point for actually then working back from there to your cell, as well as working back to the kind of printing that you're going to use. That's where basically laser is being used in its very niche applications. It's being used for. Currently, there's a company in France called Poetis that is using laser-based bioprinting to produce skin. You can Google them. It's Poietis. That they have a couple of videos that would give you a good understanding of how the laser-based bioprinting has been used to print fibroblasts and keratinocytes. So now I'll move over to scaffolds. I think scaffolds are the initial constructs of any 3D bioprinting setup. So this is where the process of your 3D bioprinting starts. So you have three phases in 3D bioprinting: the pre-processing phase, where you are preparing the biomaterial. You have the bioprinting phase, where you're actually printing you're finalizing your printing parameters. And once the printing is done, you get something like this, which is called a scaffold. And this scaffold is then incubated over a period of time, and slowly you would actually see these pores disappear, and then a thin sheet actually forming. And it's a really beautiful process when you see it over a period of time. Now, scaffold design plays a very important role in bioprinting. Specifically, if you're looking at at this particular scaffold, this was the initial scaffold that we used for skin-based bioprinting. What we noticed was that the gaps in between this was too far away. It would seem small to the human eye, but for cells, it's basically crossing a large distance to go to the other strut. And that's where the scaffold design plays a very important role. And that's why we went along with the earlier video, the design in the earlier video that I showed you. So this is a small video on how we basically design the scaffold. So if you see here, we have a 10-layer scaffold that we are designing from step by step. We basically design, we first take the design layers. So we decide, okay, what would be the perimeter of, or what would be the range that we are working with. Basically we design the tool path. We design what would be the tool path in each layer, and what would basically be the exact construction from layer to layer. This is one aspect of how we design the scaffold. Another way is you can use any CAD software to design your entire scaffold, and you can get it into this surface. So what you're seeing here is something called a slicing software that allows us to basically break this entire design into something called G-codes. G-codes are basically it's the coding language for bioprinters, that bioprinters understand which direction the extrusion head has to move in. This is specifically what G-codes do. So what the software is doing now is it's taking the tool path. The engineer here is actually checking if the tool path is fine. Once the tool path is fine, the next phase would be exporting the G-code, where we create the G-code and we start printing. So there are two types of scaffold bioprinting when you're looking at two types of bioprinting in scaffolds. One is scaffold-free bioprinting, where basically the cells are already present within the scaffold, and a scaffold-based bioprinting, where you're already printing the scaffold and you're putting the cells on top of this. I will stop here before I go into biomaterials and hydrogels. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Yes, Piyush.
Yeah.
Now we read about scaffolds which are not only single phase, but they are biphasic or multiphasic or gradient scaffolds.
Yes.
So is it possible to print biphasic or multiphasic or gradient scaffolds if we plan to?
Yes, you. I mean, right now the technology of bioprinting allows you to print with multiple scaffolds. So there are different ways. So one is where you would have two different syringes like this within the bioprinter. One syringe would print a particular layer, and then you can design another layer to be on top of it that would have a completely different biomaterial. So it allows you to print with different materials at different points of types. And you can also design specifically what particular areas of the scaffold you want BioInk B to be, and in what different areas of the scaffold would you require BioInk A to be in. So that's where it actually bioprinting, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of multi-extrusion printing capability, it allows you to work with different cell types and biomaterials to allow for different biomaterials to work. Another way in which biphasic bioprinting is being done is using a syringe, basically using sacrificial bioprinting, where you already have a layer of say an agarose or gelatin, and you're printing within that. This is specifically being used to print vasculature. Vasculature is one of the biggest hurdles in bioprinting, where getting vasculature to each and every cell, that is one thing which is quite difficult, and that is something which scientists are trying to kind of perfect. And that's where sacrificial bioprinting has played a very important role. I hope I answered your question, ma'am.
Thank you. If we plan to print osteochondral scaffold, and we want to have different types of cells in the two layers. So the bony part of the scaffold and the chondral part. And also we plan to have vasculature in both the scaffolds. So we would be using multiple nozzle extruder for printing
most
all
likely. Most likely you would be using multiple nozzles. So you would be using one nozzle to print the basic, that would be printing the basic, if you look in the chondrite structure, the bone part would be printed by one extruder, and then you have another one that is actually printing the cartilage in certain areas. But the most important part is your BioInk. So you need to understand that even though the cells are going to interact with each other, understanding the kind of BioInk that you're going to use, the biomaterial that you're going to use is very important, because the BioInk that would be there for cartilage cells would be different from the ones that you would have that you would have for general bone-based cells. And then when you're looking at interaction between these biomaterials, that's another important factor as well during scaffold construction. The third thing I would say is in terms of vasculature, it is more of a triple extruder setup, where you would require another extruder to actually print a central vascular theme in between within the entire construct. And that is something that scientists are doing globally to understand, okay, if I print a central, a central vascular structure, would that actually start branching out and and then build the cells around it? So that's what they're planning to do. And that's one setup that you can look at.
What about the interface? So any suggestion for the interface that it doesn't split between the two osteo and chondral splitting? So to avoid that, anything has to be done additionally?
one would be cross-linking. So cross-linking between polymers is quite important. So specifically, I can tell you with respect to ours, when we are printing the skin, when we are looking at the dermal and epidermal layer, you have the dermal and epidermal junction, but initially when you're building the scaffold, you're building basically two different biomaterials. But making those two biomaterials to stick together is a very important part. This allows for the two layers to actually form an initial bridge, which is later on formed by the cells. So cross-linking once you're printing is actually a very important aspect. So this is where layering techniques and bioprinting comes in, where you are first printing your cell layer, then you have a layer in between that basically forms a bridge between the next layer. So for example, if I'm printing with dermal fibroblasts at my lowest layer, I would basically have a collagen sheet or a gelatin sheet that forms a bridge, and then I print the and then after that, I print the epidermal layer containing the keratinocytes on top. This allows for better interaction between the layers. It forms like that bridge, which is temporary. And over a period of time, that bridge is actually broken down by the cells, and the cells start forming their own ECM.
One more thing I was thinking, if you have to incorporate some hydrogel as well, so how do you think, means hydrogel has also to be printed, or it has to be after the scaffold is done, it has to be engaged in the hydrogel? Any idea on that?
Can you come again, ma'am? The last part.
So the scaffold has to have a
Yeah.
hydrogel also. So
Okay.
usually the hydrogel has to be printed again with the scaffold, or it's like once the scaffold is printed, it has to be enveloped in a hydrogel.
No, ma'am. So the scaffold can be printed. So basically, basically when you're looking at bone-based printing, what a lot of researchers do is they go with either a slurry of HA or a mixture of HA and TCP, or a pure TCP mixture, and after that they coat it with a collagen sheet and then start seeding the cells on top of that. Because when you're looking at bioceramics, specifically the cell compatibility with bioceramics is quite low until and unless you have a more natural material within the bioink. So if it's more of condyle printing, what the suggestion from our side would be is to first print the scaffold and then probably create a bridge, what I was calling, creating a sort of like a sheath around it, and that would basically allow for that would have the points for the cell attachment, and then you see the cells on top of the scaffold. This would allow for better attachment of the cells onto the scaffold, and then the cells can start doing their work of actually metabolizing the scaffold and starting to form their own ECM.
Okay. There is a question, what about 3D printing technology hindering the solid organ printing?
Hindering the solid organ printing. So in terms of what hindering, I mean, I'm not quite understanding the question, but 3D bioprinting technology was built with an idea to bridge the gap between organ transplant availability and demand. Specifically when you're looking at whole organ printing, yes, the community or the domain is not there yet. It would take some time, but people have started moving in that direction. Now, specifically, if you're looking at, let me take an example of, say, liver tissue. There are a lot of companies globally that are working with liver tissues. Right. So, but the problem is we have not been able to build a fully vascularized liver tissue. The two main hurdles of whole organ printing, solid organ printing, is one is the vascularization. That is the holy grail of 3D bioprinting, getting the vascularization to go to each and every cell. The second one would be heterogeneous cell layering. Heterogeneous cell layering, what I'm talking about is figuring out the right biomaterials that would work for a complex, to build a completely complex organ. That's why right now, when you're looking at the applications of the technology, it has been used for cartilage, printing your cartilage. That would be the most common type of application that you would have seen of the technology. And another one that people look at is more of bioprinting with this one, bioprinting with liver-based tissue or skin-based tissue to form small constructs. I hope that answered the question.
So we have a few more questions.
Sure, sure.
One question is, do these bioprinted tissues develop vascularity when placed in vivo?
Yes, they do develop now. Now the bioprinted tissues without the epithelial cells that form the vasculature, they wouldn't form it. But given so basically, when you're looking at sacrificial bioprinting, you're printing like a hollow tube, and then you're flushing the cells within that tube. The cells start adhering to the surface of the tube and basically inner surface of the tube, and that's how they form the these larger veins and arteries. And now what they're exploring is to see if I put, say, for example, if I put fibroblasts next to them, do the channels automatically form? This is actually being studied globally at a global scale to understand better. This is with vascularization is something that would happen only, it is being studied currently, but globally there are a few breakthroughs, but not solid breakthroughs that we would say that, okay, this is a method for actually printing vasculature. So we are working with a university in London that has developed a bioink that can be used for vasculature printing. So we are actually waiting for that bioink to come in to start testing vasculature as well. The goal for us is to actually get the skin into human beings where it can be used for transplants. Now, specifically when we are moving in that direction, we are looking at vascularization, and that's where this bioink plays a very important role.
Okay. And another question is that which is better? Which is better? Yes, for pre-bioprinting or adding cells after the scaffold?
So we tested both methods with respect to, when you're looking at scaffold-free bioprinting, adding, given that the cells are within the construct, right? So let me go to an earlier slide, which will basically, So when you're looking at this, if I have the cells within the construct, if say I slice the construct like how I would slice bread, and if I view it from the side, what you would see is basically the cells would be equally distributed within the strut. Within each of these lines, it would be equally distributed. That's the beauty of scaffold-free bioprinting. Now, when you're looking at a scaffold-based bioprinting approach, the cells are layered on top. So it would take some time for the cells to actually reach to the inner areas. So the metabolization of my scaffold would be much, much longer because the cells have to move to the inner areas of the scaffold. In a scaffold-free approach, the cells are already there within the scaffold, and they are already they are already metabolizing the scaffold from the inside out. So that's where it plays a very important role. So for us, scaffold-free bioprinting is always a better approach because you have uniform distribution of cells throughout the scaffold.
Okay.
That cannot hold good for bone bioprinting, I suppose, because you need to have some mechanical properties also there. So
yes, exactly.
So depending upon the area to use, you can choose which one to use.
Yes, it depends upon whichever area that you're focusing on.
And what about the regulations in India?
Now,
so
human
studies are allowed or not?
So currently there are Dr. Bellare from IIT Bombay has been doing some very interesting research with AIIMS, where he has developed a bone-based bioink, and they already started the trials on human beings at AIIMS. They've already got the ICMR approval, which actually took 1.5 years. And this was specifically for bone-based defects, to correct bone-based defects. And this has already been approved by ICMR, and they've already started the trials. They started the trials in March, but the problem is that the pandemic came in the way, and now everything is put on hold. And ICMR is focused on the COVID pandemic. So right now they're going to restart the trials once everything normalizes or things get close to normal.
There's one more question. Currently, what is the cost of 3D printed biomaterial, say skin per millimeters?
So right now, when you're looking at 3D bioprinted material, if you're asking just about the biomaterial, it varies. It completely varies. So if you're looking at biomaterials, they are of different types. You have natural, synthetic. You have a mix of natural and synthetic polymers. So it depends upon which way you're going towards. So currently, we can't reveal what the prices of ours, but we would say that you would be at a cheaper this one when you're going for a more natural approach. Synthetic polymers, yes, you do find cheaper ones, but the most of the ones that we see like PLCL, PLGA, these are quite expensive right now in the market. And a mix, people generally go with a mixed approach because a mix of a natural and a synthetic polymer allows you. The synthetic polymer actually provides you with the structure, and the natural polymers allow you to get the adhesion points for the cells. So it provides a native environment, for more native environment for the cells to come and adhere and start forming their own ECM. I hope I answered that question, and if there is anything more, I would be happy to answer.
The next question is how far? Yeah, successful for small patients.
Yes, right now Dr. Bellari didn't tell me much about his research in terms of going into patients, but specifically, I think right now it is more on larger joints rather than the joints of the face. And that's where the focus is on right now. But yes, people are looking at how we can get into smaller joints, and bone bioprinting is something that has been there for quite a while, and is a very interesting space. So people are looking at how they can get it into patients as quickly as possible. As of now, I would say there is one study that is going on in India, one in Germany that I'm aware of, and another one that is going on in the USA. 3 studies that are going on bone-based bioprinting. Clinical studies, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat box.
Okay, I don't see other questions.
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly run by the rest of the slides, and then I would like to take questions at the end of it. So basically, this is the process if you're looking at 3D bioprinting, right? You have to finalize your cells or your tissue. You have to finalize that first. Then you go to the bioink composition. You figure out what is the best bioink for your cell type. Then you go ahead, finalize your bioprinting mechanism. You go and do the design for the scaffold. You go ahead with the approach that you want. Like ma'am said correctly, if it's a bone-based thing, you would go for a scaffold-based approach. Then you would go for a scaffold-free approach if it's skin. And then you figure out your printing parameters. You have the scaffold design filed, and you start bioprinting. But then you notice that there are still problems. You still have to keep fine-tuning it. So this is a loop that we face day in and day out during the production, during the R&D phase of skin, where our 3D bioprinted human skin. This is the entire loop that you look at, and this is where we see a lot of bioprinting companies are only focused on this, or they are only focused on getting the final tissue output. For us, it is the entire process. So we understood, the importance lies over here. So even if you are going with your bioprinting approach, understand your cell, understand the environment that the cell is within, understand what the cell requires to properly proliferate, differentiate, or migrate, and then start working on your biomaterial composition. It's a highly interdisciplinary field. It is a field that has cell biology, biomaterials, design, mechanical engineering, and then finally, tissue engineering as a whole. So this is the entire process of bioprinting. If you want to look at it, the current applications, what I'm talking about is in various industries, like for example, in drug efficacy testing. I'm going to show you a video on how Merck Pharmaceuticals is using our printers for drug efficacy testing. It's used for stem cell research. Skin grafting is one approach that they're using it in, where they're printing fine layers of skin that can be applied. Disease progression studies. In the latest COVID-19 pandemic, they've actually bioprinted mini lung tissues that can be used for a COVID-based approach to understand how the disease progresses and how it affects the tissue over a period of time. And once the virus is gone, once the lung tissue is re-exposed to the virus, what exactly happens to the lung tissue once it's re-exposed to the virus. So these are studies that are being done. It's also being one of our projects with Majumdar Shaw Center for Translational Research. They were doing cell migratory and behavioral studies to understand how tumor cells behave in different environments, and how do they behave under different scaffold designs altogether. You know, so scaffold designs where the cells are more tightly packed, how do they behave, or where the cells are more far apart, how do they behave. So these are some of the studies that people have done using the technology. Now, if you're looking at pharmaceutical industry, you know, it generally takes $1.2 billion in 12 years. This is the general template when you're looking at going from 10,000 potential compounds to that one thing that would actually get you a drug. And this is specifically a short video on how Merck is using R. So you can see this is the red portion is already layered. So here basically you have your tumor cells, on top of which we are actually layering a certain drug. And this drug actually allows us to, they wanted to study the interaction of the drug on top of the tumor cells that have been already laid within this plate. You can see this is what basically Merck is doing. This is used to study the effect of their drug on specific tumor cells. So each of these wells have different cell population, cell densities, and they understand under different cell densities what exactly happens to this one, what exactly happens to the tissue or the tumor. Now, this is specifically for more of, this is a TCP based slurry, which is actually been printed. This is a pure TCP slurry that we had printed for a researcher. This was specifically to understand, he wanted to layer it with cells in order to understand how the cells are interacting with the layers, and if he puts a basic collagen coating on this, how would it affect? So this is specifically a more slower feed rate that we're using, a slower speed printing that we're using, in order to get the layers much more smoother and much more uniform. And this is a pure, it's a pure TCP based slurry where the bed is heated to a certain temperature, and the bed is heated to actually evaporate the solvent that the TCP is dissolved in. So organ on a chip is another technology where pharma is using it a lot, where they've created smaller liver organoids as well as smaller liver tissues that are being used for testing. One company, bioprinting company Organovo, has developed something called XV liver, which is basically 3D bioprinted liver that is being used in pharmaceutical companies like Roche and Pfizer to understand the technology's applications a little more. Cancer research, like I showed you in the previous video, cancer research is one way in which 3D bioprinting has been applied across sectors, specifically in pharma. And this is the first clinical application where the first bioprinted ureter was actually put into this boy 14 years ago, which is done by Dr. Antonio Atala. And this specifically was one of the earliest applications of the technology. And right now, the kid is actually still continuing to live his life normally even after the transplant. This is one of the first promises of 3D bioprinting that is actually shown to the world. If you're looking at 3D bioprinters in India currently, I just want to shift the focus a little bit to that. But when you're looking at 3D bioprinters in India, the cost of commercial 3D bioprinters are really high, and generally they have rigid engineering ecosystems. And that's when we went ahead and we started building out our own engineering ecosystems. We understood that we needed to have control over our engineering, in order to play with it or change it whenever the requirement came up. And that's when we built Thrivima. What you see here on the right-hand side is Thrivima. This was built, the machine that you see is built for Merck Pharmaceuticals for their specific requirement. One person had asked me about the bed. So this is exactly how the bed looks like. You have a temperature control system that allows you to control the temperature anywhere between 0 degrees all the way to plus 60 degrees. You have two extruder heads that move up and down. Each of them are also temperature controlled. You have here they didn't require a sterility system because they were already keeping it within the biosafety cabinet, but specifically if required we could also build a sterility system. Here the bed moves on the X and Y plane, and you have the extruders that move on the Z plane up and down. You have these valves that you see here on the right are pressure valves that allows us to apply pneumatic pressure onto the syringes that are placed over here. These are some of the examples of where we have used bioprinting. So what you see here on your bottom left corner of the screen is what the output that we have at Merck. And then you have a more synthetic based polymer that we printed with. So all these are experiments that we had done when we initially built out our technology. We went out to researchers, we told them, hey, we have a bioprinter in place and we'd really like you guys to test it out. And that's what basically they did using it. In the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly run you through InnoSkin. So what we do with InnoSkin is we have a trade secret biomaterial that we've printed. We load the cells into the syringe. The syringe is then loaded into our printer we have a couple of patents on the technology as well. It's printed into the scaffold format. This is incubated over a period of time, and then you get the final InnoSkin output. So this currently we are at a phase where we are validating InnoSkin. So it's as thin as peeling the skin off your lip. And that's how thin the skin is actually, the topmost layer of your skin is. And that's basically what we've printed. And basically, if you're looking at bioprinting, you have, it is a more close-up shot of the skin. And if you're looking at bioprinting, you have three different phases, like I mentioned: pre-processing, bioprinting, and post-processing. We've completed all these three stages, and we're currently internally validating the skin for testing. And the application of the skin would be to ban animal testing. The goal of the company is to see how we can bioprint human skin that can go into labs that can prevent animals from being tested in cosmetic, agrochemical, and chemical industries. In the long term, we are looking at how we can apply the skin onto human beings for transplants. To do that, we would have to get hair follicles, we would have to get sweat glands and vascularization. So there are different cell types that have to play together. And we understand that no singular company can do all this. And that's where we are looking at how we can collaborate with folks and collaborate with industry partners and academia in order to see how we can push the technology more towards a clinical approach. Bioprinting's holy grail has always been a clinical approach, and we at NBIL believe that it's a community that has to work towards it rather than a singular company doing everything. That's it from my side. I would be more than happy if you guys have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
So thank you, Piyush. It was an excellent presentation on 3D bioprinting. I think people got that message, what we can do and how it is being done. And we had a lot of questions also for you. So thank you so much. Richa, is there any question?
No, ma'am. Yeah, one more just now. How is the post-processing done?
So the post-processing process is very unique. So you have to keep changing the media. So what you see here on your screen is basically we do multiple media changes. So the scaffolds are placed within these small bells. and we change the media over a period of time. And the media is for, specific applications. And, if you're using skin, you would have a different kind of media that would provide the nutrients for the cells to perfectly form the ECM. And this is in our media, the in-house media that we have developed. So the media was developed keeping three aspects in mind. One, how do we keep the keratinocytes alive? Two, what would be the right reagents for the media to work? And three, how can we provide the best components for the ECM?
So that's it, and we have all appreciations for you for the nice presentation by our participants.
I think we can have one group photo also.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
If all of you can have your video on.
Sure, I'll just switch on my video.
We forgot about this, but since we had a photography session yesterday, and I thought we will do it every time. So if you can stop sharing.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is everybody else joining in? Please put your videos on. Rameshwari, Alka, Shuchi, Soumya,
some problem.
Dapilba. Piyush, yourself?
Yes, I'm on. You can see
okay. So that one is different.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll click it now. Look into the screen, everyone. Cheese.
Cheese.
Just with the mask, ma'am. No cheese.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to share your. I need to share screen for your certificate. So this is old one. So I'll mail it to you, but please accept it virtually. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope this helped. And anything you can write in to me, ma'am has my email ID and contact. Anything you can reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you.